Through reciprocal imitation, you live according to the average expectation. Therefore, the hero was murdered, since we have all been aping him.
That's what Carl Jung said 100 years ago. And it's maybe even more true today with the emergence of AI, with algorithms on the internet, with how content itself is found, with how many people are trying to do everything like everybody else in an age where we can all see the ideals on the internet, or try to imitate the next hero or the next celebrity or the next popular person at our school or whatever it is. There's this innate drive or incentive to try to ape the hero. What does that mean? Well, fundamentally it means something like trying to copy the path that has already worked for someone else, to do exactly as someone else has done, to be exactly as somebody else has been. But what's Carl Jung's point? The point is that we all know the success stories. We all know the famous people. We all know the legends of myth and story, like Luke Skywalker or whatever it is. We know the famous celebrities of the day and how they made it popular. We know the famous businessmen and how they made it popular. And so our ego thinks, well, if that worked for them, then it'll work for me. So I should copy them. I should buy what they have. I should own what they own. I should do what they do. I should look like how they look. I should talk how they talk. And the irony, and this is what Jung's point is that the hero, by definition, was the hero because they did not try to do somebody else's thing. They were trying not to be somebody else. They were just doing their thing. But what does that mean? And I think in modern day, it's really hard to understand and figure out what being authentic or being real, or what the opposite of aping the hero even means. And this is what Carl Jung's entire philosophy or his work was built on, was this process of individuation and what it means to become a whole self. And one of the fundamental ideas here is that the ego always wants to imitate. It always wants to ape, because again, that path has already been laid out by somebody else. So it inherently feels safe. It feels like you're headed in the right direction. But a point that Jung makes throughout this book, which is the Red Book, and for those who are interested in consciousness and in self-development, or in the process of individuation or becoming a whole self, or anything along those lines, the Red Book is incredible, because it's Jung's documentation of his process into the unconscious, into the forces that drive the unconscious, and this process of individuation, becoming a more whole, total self. And this may sound like absolutely insane language to someone who has not looked into this before, which is understandable. But at its surface, the ideas are quite understandable. Fundamentally, again, what does the ego want? The ego wants to succeed with the least amount of effort. It wants to maintain your current state. It wants to make life as easy as possible with the most reward as possible in the trade-off. And so what is the ego trying to do? It's trying to find the easiest path to get there. So why not copy what's already worked? Why not try to do the same thing as everyone else? The problem is that while it may work in the short term, what are you doing? You're basically trying to copy the same thing that everyone else is trying to copy. This is the idea of aping the hero. I mean, let's just think about, we're watching this video maybe on YouTube or on social media. Like, for example, if you're trying to make content and like Mr. Beast, I mean, Mr. Beast is making content for the broadest average person, the broadest underlying principles that connect all of us as humans. Challenge, money, gain, relationship, whatever it is, emotion. But his modern day content isn't exactly touching at the deepest level with any individual person. It's hitting the most surface level commonalities between people, which is why it serves such a large audience. But that's one way to build a business, I guess. But when it comes to making content and how to live your life, it may not be the most optimal, because if everyone's trying to copy Mr. Beast, inherently now suddenly your content will start to look like everybody else's. And why did it work for Mr. Beast? It's because he was the first person to do it in that way, the first person to risk that amount of money, the first person to put that much money on the line for his type of content. And that's why it worked. But now, when all of us try to ape the hero, try to copy his style, and this is the same thing in any other industry, especially creative stuff, because it's so obvious, because what resonates in art is the personal, it is the authentic. And why? We'll get to that in a second. But when you're trying to copy everyone else's style, you just become a cheap ripoff of someone else. So what does it actually mean to write in your own style, to be your own person, to be authentic, to not ape? Well, the key is that, the ego wants to look outward. But Jung made the point that the key is to look inward at the things that you've never examined before. And this is the confrontation with the shadow. It's looking at the things that you previously didn't have in your conscious thought, that were suppressed or repressed or never examined. And through Jung called the shadow the doorway to the self, in that sense, that you have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Like, you have to walk through the darkness, through the shadow, through this door to the basement before you can find the full self. You have to reunite the parts of you that were left behind from your younger years or from your past. And from that emerges a organic, authentic, personal being that is entirely unique, that is the antithesis to aping the hero. But this is obviously difficult, because your ego is going to perceive the risk of being kicked out of the group from being different, because back in the day of tribes or whatnot, it would have been risky to be different. If you're different, you have the chance of being ostracized, of being kicked out of the group, and that would have resulted in death, of starvation, not getting the share of the food from the people who you would have been otherwise the same as, and now suddenly you're different, and they don't like that. So now suddenly you're not getting food anymore. But these are obviously not relevant to the modern day. But your ego doesn't know that, and it still acts in that way. So you have to slowly but surely observe the unobserved in your life, which is not easy to do, obviously. In my experience, the best way to do this is through emotions, where emotions themselves and the body's reactions actually act as a little flag in the sand, a flag in the dirt, a red flag, you may say, that notifies or signals where unexamined beliefs may be lying, or unexamined parts of your life, unexamined beliefs especially, where they may be lying. And through that, when you notice your jaw tighten, or your chest, your heart rate increase, or you kind of tighten up or tense up, or you start sweating, your palms are sweaty, arms are heavy. If Mom Spaghetti shows up, then you're really in trouble. But the idea here is that those are signals the body fires off immediately, because your ego, at the surface level, is the thought process of the underlying bodily signals that defend your current state, your life. And so, what are those responses from the body? Those responses are survival responses, which means that your body is perceiving something is threatening you. But the reality is, like we laid out, is that in modern day, for all of us, those threats aren't real. They aren't actually threats anymore. It's only threats that would have been real when you were a child. Because when you're a child, yeah, sure, you need your parents to take care of you. You can't feed yourself. You can't go get a job. You can't learn new skills on your own. You can't look it up on the internet. You can't generate, sales or go door to door and try to mow people's lawns. You can't find new ways to provide for yourself. But good news is, as we all get older, we can. And now that's one heck of a powerful thing, because suddenly now we all have the ability to take care of ourselves. And from that opens up a freedom to individuate in that sense. Carl Jung himself experienced this when he had his you may say confrontation or beginning of integration with his ego. After he decided it was his call to adventure was to post a paper that he disagreed with Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was his mentor. People were calling him the next Sigmund Freud. Freud said that he was like the brilliant protege, basically his apprentice. And then Carl Jung realized Freud had some ideas that weren't exactly correct. That not everything was a sexual drive and these types of things. And so Freud, after Jung decided, okay, I'm going to publish this paper and disagree with him publicly, Freud basically disowned him and they never talked again, essentially. And I highly recommend reading. Jung talks about this in his autobiography at the end of his life, and how, Freud's ego couldn't get out of his own way in that regard. And Jung, anyway, all that to say is Jung, after that, quit his job as a professor, and he maintained only his patients, his clinical care, as a psychologist. And he spent the next 10 years, at least 3 years full time, where he would just meet with his patients, and then he would spend all of his time diving into his own unconscious, letting things emerge naturally through a process of active imagination, as he called it, but basically like dreaming while awake. And through that, he that was his method of embracing the unconscious and diving into the shadow. Nowadays we have, a more modern techniques, and we've learned so much thanks to the entire line of thought from Carl Jung and company. And this is where these ideas of, your body signals where these beliefs may be lying. That like what I was talking about is that you can use your body as a signal for where these beliefs may be, and then you can sit with them. And the key is you don't judge them. You don't add more emotional value to them. You say, can I live without that thing? And so from that acceptance of, I don't need this anymore. It doesn't serve any aspect of life. And you can begin to let these things go. And those can be, beliefs, identities, values, any type of belief about, one's life, about the definition of words, about what something means. All of these things are embedded in one's unconscious, in one's psyche, and they are unconscious. And so you have to bring them to the forefront. Otherwise, your ego will defend them, these core identities that otherwise define who you are. And those are where the negative emotions arise from in life. Your negative emotions are in response to threats to core identities, to beliefs, to important aspects of your worldview. The ego's like, oh my word, if we lose this one, if we're proven wrong about this, or if we're not correct about this thing, our world's gonna fall apart and we're gonna suffer. So we need to defend this with emotion, with a response, with a physiological response to act. So a lot of people, their entire mode of action stems from negative emotion, whether it's shame or fear or anger, because because they've never found a way to let go of these identities, and the ego doesn't want to let go of them, because this is how you've, I mean, I was in this spot for a long time too. This is how I personally motivated myself back in high school and early in college. I was motivated by anger and shame and fear, and that drove me to action. So I would only act as long as I was in negative states. And that's why I would always procrastinate my work. I was overweight because there was no motivation to work out until I got so overweight that I felt so much shame that it drove me to go to the gym and work out, but then it wasn't sustainable. You'd lose the weight and then gain it back because you then didn't have the negative emotion anymore that was driving your action in the first place. So the only way to get past this is by letting go of the beliefs themselves, and getting to the point where you can you realize that your beliefs that your beliefs aren't objective in themselves, that there is something to the fact that you can actually modulate them yourself. And I mean, I saw a really awesome video of a guy on YouTube who said, like, who really illustrated this well, is the voice in your head, this ego, try to predict the voice in your head's next thought. Try to predict your next thought. If it was entirely you, and this is what Jung is saying, is that they're separate. The ego is not the self. The total you, the entire encompassing you, is not the ego. The ego is the voice in your head. And that ego has its own train of thought. Sometimes it feels like you, sometimes it doesn't. And that's what this video was pointing to. It's like, try to predict its next thought. You can't. So I would highly recommend just sitting here and trying to really predict what your next thoughts are going to be. And maybe all you're going to get to is like the repetitive same word over and over and over, like ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. But that's not really predicting your next thought, And this goes to a lot of the work that we've been doing recently. I mean, and I could talk for hours about this, but this is the core first principle I wanted to discuss today, is we're all stuck trying to ape the hero. But maybe the only way to actually become truly you, to truly find to truly find the path that you were destined for, your destiny in that sense, your purpose, your true meaning in life, is to let go of the need to know where to go. And that's going to be scary. It's going to feel like you're walking into a dark cave. But the point Jung is making is that if we all try to ape the hero, we murder the hero. And if we murder the hero, and since we have murdered the hero, none of us will be a hero. And so the only way to be a hero is by releasing the need to be one. And in that is the freedom to act, the freedom to be, the freedom to exist. And that's where one's life truly, truly begins. And I feel as though I'm in the early stages of this journey, and it's been an absolute just joy. And I would love if others join us, join the journey in that sense, and find their own path in that way. So hopefully something resonates, and we will talk more very soon. Thanks for hanging. Talk to you. Bye.